Hey folks, MasakoX here. I would like to point you all to my newly refreshed Patreon at patreon.com/MasakoX, just to make sure the channel can keep on chugging along. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get on to the story. Okay, we've had time to digest all the information we were gotten in Daima, and there were answers that were given, but there are many new questions, and amongst them, one seems more intriguing than the others. Where do the angels come from? But before we can do this, it'll be interesting to try and define demons, angels, and devils. Let's start with the demons or the margin. The word demon comes from the ancient word from the Greek language of daimon, which describes an entity of divine power. It itself most likely originated from diastai, to divide or distribute. Also important to note is that originally it didn't have good or bad connotations, as in the works of Plato, Socrates, and Heraclitus. They could be both helpful or malevolent, very much like those we know from the likes of Dragon Ball. Later on, Xenocrates was one of the first who deemed them absolutely evil, as within dualistic beliefs, every entity related to matter was considered to be bad. Later on, Abrahamic religions, we're talking Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, used the word demon to describe degraded, polytheistic pagan deities, and at some point in Christianity, it was identical with devils. Before we then get to devils, and we kind of need them in the least in this discussion, let's explain the term margin, and after that, angels. Generally, it does simply mean magical person, and is connected to jinn, which connects to the spirits of air and fire. The most well-known pop cultural depictions of them are genies and efriti, but they are very, very different from their mythological counterparts. Generally, the words these days tend to be connected to the magical type of entity that do not have any demonic connotations, but it is clear that Toriyama knew the Western meaning of demon and decided to, as always, play around with it a little. So, yeah. Let's get to the angels now. Most often, they are described as messengers between the deity and humanity in Abrahamic religions. They can also perform roles of guardians and guides to individual humans, or in general, servants of God. The origin of the word comes from the late Greek word angelos, literally messenger. Finally, we have the devil, which comes from the Greek diabolos, slanderer. It can refer to a singular, personified source of all evil, symbol of evil in humanity, or to either very specific fallen angel-type persons, you know what I'm getting at, Lucifer and all that jazz, or a group of them that serve the big head honcho, whose title starts with S, and YouTube could demonetize us for saying the rest of it. In our hands, we also need to prepare the in-world context within the Dragon Ball timeline. And for that, we have something we haven't done in a while, an impropt diagram made in Microsoft Paint. Oh, it's been a while since we've done one of those. This one will help us divide the timeline and help us establish when angels could realistically appear in Dragon Ball history. We will add the Destroyers and Zeno to the mix because, according to one of our hypotheses, these two factors are in fact connected. Okay, so let's decipher this pyramid, shall we? First, we of course have the peak, because otherwise it wouldn't be a true pyramid, marked with 1, referring to the demon realm from its beginning, a period of time we know almost nothing about. How long was it the only universal type entity in existence? Who created it? We aren't going with the Toribot answer, mostly because I am quite certain that Toriyama himself did not treat the presence of his own avatar entirely seriously. So I do reckon this is the mystery that will never be solved. And it doesn't have to be, because it's the top. It's mysterious. Now we have number 2, which relates to the time when the good Supreme Demon King told Rimus to create the multiverse, year 0. We don't know if this is the same as the famous divine calendar mentioned by the Great Priest during the infamous Tournament of Power saga, but hey, come on. It is quite a healthy assumption to connect the two things. Next, there's level 3, the period in which the Glind and other margins start to inhabit the newly created universes, and then Rimus appoints the Supreme Kais. Now, there is one thing that doesn't really have an official confirmation on our part. You see the whole King Yemma picture here? We think that the other world with Heaven and Hifel have been created around this time. We have mentioned before how we think the demon realm isn't entirely connected to the whole life and death cycle, and that it was made after the fact. This would explain a lot of the shenanigans with the whole being killed by an evil demon thing leaving you in limbo, and it would make most sense to place it here time-wise. Now, we get on to level 4, and level 4 starts with years 41 and 42 of the Divine Calendar, when Zalama created the Super Dragon Balls and patented the refraction technique on the stars, so they seem identical from every single angle. We then also decided to put Neighbor in there, as Namekians eventually figured out how to create their own versions by taking small chips of the Super Dragon Ball, which then tells us that they had returned to the Demon Realm at some point in which to do so. Again, it is a bit of guessing and headcanoning at this point on our part, but we wouldn't be surprised if the legendary Namekian himself was part of the original expedition that had figured out the whole thing about making their own Dragon Balls and then created his own set. It makes sense, but do keep in mind, it's not been confirmed anywhere. This is just us on a hunch. The next one is interesting, as level 5 tells us about the period of 75 million years before age, according to the mortal calendar, and refers to the argument between the old Kai and Beerus that ended up with the elderly Glind being sealed within the Z-Sword, only broken out later by Son Gohan. So it is interesting, as we now know that destroyers were around at this point, and presumably, A, Beerus had been doing his job for quite some time, he already had Whis at his side, and sadly, we don't know how the mortal calendar refers to the divine one, but, we were just working with what we got. Level 6 is an eventful period for the demon realm. It happens between 10 to 5 million years before age and is connected to 1. Abra losing the evil third eye and it being lost, 2. Never creating a barrier around the demon realm tunnel due to the chaos that had been caused in the second demon world, and then of course C. Sir Warp being established as the de facto form of travel between the demon worlds, so you couldn't just travel freely in between. And then IV, Abra placing limitations on Sir Warp, and free travel to the outside world entirely in between the demon worlds was completely nixed. 5. The Glind leaving for the universes, unhappy with their cruel ruler. This would be the final Glind exodus, the one in which Nahare, the Supreme Kai, Shin, headed for Universe 7. 6. Despite losing the third eye, the Bora takes his father's place as the Supreme Demon King. The final level, level 7, takes place in 5 million years before age. Bibbidi asks Maba to create Majin Buu. He goes on a rampage, first in the Demon Realm, then in Universe 7. The pink blob kills 4 of the 5 Supreme Kais, which, absorbing South Supreme Kai and Grand Supreme Kai, luckily means that he has become less evil. This prompts Bibbidi to seal away this Majin freak of his, which the newly appointed Supreme Kai Shin uses to destroy the wizard and hide the sealed ball containing Buu on the planet Earth. So, yeah, that's that really. These are the 7 periods that we definitely know about, that we should not look for the origin of the angels before the first chronological mention of destroyers, and most likely angels, which would be around about level 5. And again, we doubt that newly appointed Beerus would have locked in his working partner inside the Z-Sword at the beginning of his job, so both destroyers and angels must have appeared a little bit earlier than that. Now, we have 3 theories going on in our heads, so let's look through them all, shall we? So we've got hypothesis 1, that they were there, the angels, from the beginning. So the interesting part about the godly trio is that we do know for sure that Supreme Kais were being chosen from the Glind, which is going to be pretty funny actually when the multiverse runs out of them, as they are an endangered species, as made clear in Daima because, well, the trees are dead, while destroyers can be former mortals, and it is very likely that some of them at least have some sort of Martian ancestry. Long story short, they were chosen. However, angels are known to be the children of the Great Priest, who, in turn, is an attendant to, of course, the Omni King. Honestly, what do they even do? Well, they are meant to be the keepers of the gods of destruction, both their attendants and personal coaches, and sometimes maybe their own little therapist. Note that their relationship with the Supreme Kais is quite minimal. We will get to that later. What is, however, the most interesting part is that they are the strongest of all three roles. They are practically immortal, and they go dormant if their divine pupil is gone. They don't truly die. Also, we don't know the exact number of them. As in the manga, Mirus proves that you can have more than the current number of the universes to have angels. There can be trainees, which he was one of them. The question is though, for what purpose? Can angels and do angels retire? Did we even think about, okay, but what was Mirus training for then? Which universe was he going to be taking over eventually? We heard about universal reduction, which turned out to be a test, at least from the point of view of the Grand Priest. Would that mean that there could be a U universe that was about to be created? Or that they are angels performing roles that we haven't seen yet? That's not important right now though. The more important aspect is related to the fact that if angels will go against their code and actively interfere in mortal affairs, as they are meant to be neutral, let's not forget about this, they will be elated by the cosmos. Not by an individual, but literally by the universe itself. And, you know, we've seen Zamasu doing a lot of bad things. We've seen destroyers not really doing the jobs they're supposed to do. But Mirus was the only one really to be punished, as if it were the law of physics. And while the Dragon Ball wiki states that it was the GP eradicating him, there is literally no proof that the Angel Dad was the one to do that. The act of him disappearing was never linked to one person, but to his own actions and meddling in the affairs of mortals. And to be fair, Whis also did some meddling, but he always took a bit of a back seat. And what did the Grand Priest do to save him? Well, he turned him into a mortal. He disconnected him from the framework of the universe to make sure that he no longer had to comply with the rules of it, which may prove that the angels are so intricately connected to the Dragon Ball multiverse that they are, in fact, part of the system. Like androids or golems, constructs of the universe itself, programmed to perform special functions. In that sense, they are neither truly alive or truly dead. They just are. And you have to admit, there is something almost robotic about them and their cold but polite demeanour. Obviously, we are not suggesting at the moment that they are synthetic, merely that in the ecosystem of the multiverse, they are just part of the original design and they represent the laws of the universe themselves versus the Supreme Kais who predate that and the destroyers who are born from them. This is, however, not the only option that we've got here. It's certainly not the most interesting one. It's just the one that we felt the most realistic about. Hypothesis 2, they were added as a reaction to some grand disaster in the past. Okay, riddle me this. Why are the Kais and gods of destructions life-linked? What is the benefit of having the two most important and strongest deities in the universes connected? If one of them goes, then the other one goes. Obviously, it's a way to keep things balanced, should one of them die. If one is gone, the other one can't overdo things or overcompensate, and the universe could stabilize itself without their aid. However, things are going to be getting even more interesting when you really do stop to consider that A, the god of destruction is life-linked to all of the Supreme Kais in their universe, including the directional Kais, and B, is also given an angel attendant. You know, this kind of sounds to me like the system itself is far less trusting towards the gods of destruction. In a way, they are treated as a necessary evil. And again, it is understandable. It is much easier to burn a forest than to overplant a forest, yet you can kind of see that they do have that outsider treatment. Do keep in mind here that Reimus basically had chosen Glind, his fellow Margin, to have the other part of the cake and eat it. And this kind of starts to make more sense, but in a way shows the creator himself as some kind of biased entity. Now, the question that occurred to us while watching Daima, Ham and I, is when Reimus decided, okay, we're going to need someone to destroy stuff as well. How many years would have had to pass for the destroyers to be established? And by that, I also mean the Omni King in taking the throne, because he does do his fair share of destroying things. I think the idea of him being the Super Destroyer is even more likely now that we have Reimus in our eyes, and confirmation of him creating the entire universe and dealing with that part. Maybe the fact that Zeno is also the overlord of the multiverse is a trivial one, that maybe Reimus just got bored or didn't really want to rule. That feels like a very Toriyama way of explaining things, that he just made Zeno as some kind of puppet himself. And at the same time, Zeno is a destructive entity. We saw him erasing an entire timeline, but truth be told, we heard about him destroying 6 of them before destroying Trunks' one, when he was in a foul mood and throwing a tantrum. And I don't know, I never really fully bought that, it just felt a little weird. It's kind of an excuse. We don't really see him having violent mood swings or anything like that. He's either happy or eerily calm. And just like with the decision to make another reduction, which ended up being a test and might have been only a show to stress out their guards, neither of the 2 Omni Kings right now seem to be explosive types, We're told that they are explosive, but we don't actually see it. But you know what that allows? Control. What is Beerus's favorite threat? If you don't do X, I will do Y, as in destroy you. How did Scare a destroyer god then? Well, establish that his boss can do the same to him, and his entire universe. I do believe that Zeno erased universes 13 through 18. I do think there was a good reason for it, but I don't think it's the reason that has been explained to us, and if there wasn't, maybe this was the time when Reimus realized that he had to install some sort of safekeeping mechanism for both Zeno and the destroyers, as they are potentially rather dangerous? Maybe, I don't know, witnessing the destruction of 1/3 of his own creation made Reimus realize, yeah, I better make sure there's something in place that, I don't know, could keep it in check day to day. And the 2 solutions were angels and the lifelinks. Maybe originally, Zeno was the destroyer. And after what happened, it was decided that maybe a little bit of a recruitment drive would be made from the inhabitants of all the remaining universes. That means there was some sort of relatability. Just so Zeno doesn't have to, do all that scary stuff anymore, and his insane power could be utilized in a slightly different way. Look, now you have a caretaker and a friend, the Grand Priest. He will take good care of you. In a way, Zeno can be a bit of a freak accident that Reimus had created, and a lot of the systems that are in place are there because of him. Keep in mind here, Kibito knew about Zeno, Shin didn't. Shin, on the other hand, knew about Reimus, which means that as an older Glind, Kibito must have been told about the Omni King during his time in Universe 7. He might have left the safety of the Demon Realm before the time of Abura, and had been told about this new development. This new Omni King had been established. Shin obviously didn't get the memo, as the member of the last generation of Glind who had left the Demon Realm for good. This would, in our opinion, place the origin of the angels between level 4 and level 5. We do think that the 42nd year of the Divine Calendar would be a little bit too early for major universal reductions to have taken place, and since we don't know how the 2 calendars actually connect, how you can decode them, the 2 floors of our pyramid can be divided by billions of years for all we know. Still, there is a third way, and that is Hypothesis 3. The Demon Realm was not the only original realm. Now, okay, in one way or another, Daima simplified how we look at the Dragon Ball universe. The Demon Realm is Universe 0. Here comes Reimus, and bam! Multiverse and Supreme Kais. But we also have angels and a dragon god. I know that we are talking a lot about Zalamo on this channel, and he was just a footnote in the lore when you stop to think about it. But if we stay true to the Divine Calendar, and granted we don't even know what a year in the Divine Calendar might actually be, for all we know it can actually mean 1 million mortal years, it took 42 of those for a dragon god to appear. And also, the whole system of angels. What if there were more, let's call them spiritual universes, like the Demon Realm? Not a crazy amount, but, just a few. Maybe one of them had angels within them. The other had dragons. Simple as that. Maybe at one point, Reimus went there and invited them in to be part of this grand new experiment. Maybe they even managed to create some sort of agreement. I know, this is the most wild one you've heard, but we can't really say that it isn't true. Most of the Reimus lore that we do know, that we heard from Shin, and most of the Zeno lore we know from Beerus, and those 2 have one thing in common. one more than being the prime deities for Universe 7, that is. They are not the most reliable of narrators, and they clearly have cognitive gaps, perhaps due to them being rubbish at their jobs, or maybe perhaps by design. Again, we don't know. And, we may never know. Toriyama could have taken all of the secrets to the other world with him. But still, I do think it's fun to theorize. Most of this video, of course, is just part of our insane musings, so do keep that in mind. We do feel that the series is hinting at some things at the same time. It's all open for interpretation. As long as someone doesn't confirm or deny the origins of the angels, we are going to be left wondering. But still, it is a fascinating subject that has opened an even bigger can of worms for us, and you know what? That is very Toriyama. You want answers? Fine. And what he did left us with even more questions, but alas, fun ones.